The official history of World War I is crystal clear and well documented. Millions of soldiers died in the muddy trenches of Europe. Mustard gas poisoned entire generations. Artillery fire transformed green fields into moonscapes of craters and destruction. We know those horrors. We've studied them, commemorated them, and sworn never to repeat them. But there's another dimension to that war that remains hidden, a dimension that played out not in the trenches, but in the dark depths of the Atlantic Ocean. Down there, beneath the surface, German submarines hunted Allied convoys in a campaign that threatened to strangle Britain into surrender. U-boats were the revolutionary new weapon, steel machines that lurked beneath the waves, surfacing only to launch deadly torpedoes against unsuspecting merchant ships. The Kaiserliche Marine, the Imperial German Navy, had perfected this form of warfare. Their commanders were seasoned men, trained at Europe's finest naval academies, veterans of hundreds of combat patrols. These weren't nervous soldiers or inexperienced recruits. These were ocean professionals who knew every sound of the sea, every pattern of the waves, every quirk of their submarine machinery. Men who'd survived depth charge attacks, North Atlantic storms, and desperate encounters with British destroyers. When these men reported something unusual, their superiors paid attention. When they documented encounters that defied explanation, naval intelligence took note. And when multiple crews at different times and places described the same impossible phenomena, a thorough investigation should have been launched. Instead, a systematic suppression began. Reports were classified, witnesses were silenced, evidence was destroyed, and the men who'd seen too much started disappearing with a regularity that defied all statistical coincidence. February 19, 1917, marked one of those encounters, an encounter that would forever change the understanding of what really lurked in the depths of the Atlantic, an encounter that the German Navy would work desperately to erase from history. But before you can understand the magnitude of the suppression, you need to know exactly what the crew of SMU-28 saw that cold February morning. 200 nautical miles west of Ireland, the Atlantic Ocean stretched calm beneath a clear sky. Dawn was beginning to break on the eastern horizon, painting the water in shades of deep gray and blue. Air temperature was 3 degrees Celsius. The sea was tranquil, with waves less than half a meter high. Perfect hunting conditions. SMU-28 was cruising at periscope depth, gliding silently beneath the surface on electric motors. The submarine had been submerged for 11 hours, conserving diesel fuel, stalking the shipping lanes where Allied convoys transported vital supplies to Britain. The commander of U-28 was Korvettenkapitän Freiherr Georg-Günther von Spiegel von Unzupeckelsheim. 33 years old, he came from an aristocratic Westphalian family with 500 years of military tradition. Tall, thin, with the rigid bearing typical of Prussian nobility, von Spiegel had commanded U-28 since October 1915. His record spoke for itself. 21 confirmed sinkings, 67,000 tons of Allied shipping sent to the ocean floor. He was one of the most successful submarine commanders in the Kaiserliche Marine. His superiors considered him methodical, precise, absolutely rational. He never exaggerated in his reports. He never let emotion cloud his judgment. He'd survived depth charge attacks that cracked his submarine's pressure gauges. He'd evaded destroyer hunts that lasted entire days. He'd navigated through North Atlantic storms that would have torn apart less sturdy vessels. In 2 years of submarine warfare, he'd seen the worst the ocean and the enemy could offer. Nothing in that experience had prepared him for what was about to happen.
At 0517 hours, the hydrophone operator reported a contact. Matrosengefreiter Klaus Zimmermann, a 24-year-old from Hamburg, had headphones pressed against his ears, listening to ocean sounds amplified by the submarine's acoustic equipment. Zimmermann was a specialist trained at Marineschule Mürwik, capable of identifying any Allied vessel by the unique sound of its propellers. The reported contact had a large acoustic signature: single propeller, regular revolutions, moderate speed. Exactly the profile of a merchant freighter sailing without escort. Bearing was 215 degrees, distance approximately 8,000 meters. Von Spiegel ordered the periscope raised. It was standard procedure in Germany's unrestricted submarine warfare campaign that had resumed just 19 days earlier. Identify the target, surface if it's safe, warn the crew if the ship is neutral, sink with deck gun or torpedoes.
Oberleutnant Sergei Friedrich Wilhelm Hartmann, U-28's watch officer, positioned himself next to von Spiegel. Hartmann was 29, came from Kiel, the port city that was the heart of the German Navy. He'd enlisted in 1909, served aboard the battleship SMS Helgoland before transferring to submarine service in 1914. 48 war patrols, decorated with the Iron Cross Second Class after the Battle of Jutland, known among the crew as unflappable, technically brilliant, immune to panic. Von Spiegel looked through the periscope, slowly rotating it to scan the horizon. Visibility was excellent. Dawn provided enough light to clearly see several kilometers in all directions. There was no ship visible on the surface. Von Spiegel frowned. He ordered Hartmann to verify the hydrophone reading. Zimmermann confirmed. Massive contact, single propeller, bearing now 220 degrees, depth approximately 40 meters. Not on the surface, submerged. Von Spiegel's brain processed this information quickly. Allied submarines were known to U-28, clumsy, noisy craft that posed little threat to an experienced commander. If there was a British or French submarine in the area, it would be an opportunity for an easy sinking. Von Spiegel made the decision. He ordered battle station surface, prepared the deck gun crew. U-28 blew its ballast tanks and began to ascend. The submarine broke the surface at 05:23 a.m. The deck gun crew scrambled through the conning tower hatch, moving with the precision born of hundreds of drills. Von Spiegel and Hartmann went out onto the bridge, binoculars in hand, scanning the sea for the contact. Dawn light, excellent visibility, absolutely calm sea state. There was no vessel visible in any direction. Then Hartmann pointed at the water, 400 meters to port. What they saw defied everything they understood about naval engineering, physics, and submarine warfare. Through the clear Atlantic water, clearly visible beneath the surface, there was a structure. Not a known vessel, not a submarine from any nation, something completely different. The shape was cylindrical, but not like conventional submarines. Smoother, more uniform, without the interruptions of conning towers, periscopes, or diving planes. The length, estimated by comparing it to known visual references, was approximately 120 meters, almost 3 times the length of U-28. The diameter was impressive, 15 meters, maybe more, comparable to the largest battleships of the era. But the most extraordinary thing wasn't its size. It was its luminosity.
The object was emitting its own light, a greenish-whitish luminescence that illuminated the surrounding water in a 50-meter radius. The light pulsed irregularly, approximately once every 8 to 12 seconds, as if it were breathing. And it was moving. Not floating with the current, not drifting passively. It was moving with evident purpose, maintaining constant depth, executing controlled and precise turns. Von Spiegel lowered his binoculars. He looked at Hartmann. The watch officer's face was pale, eyes fixed on the object beneath the water. The deck gun crew stood motionless, watching. No one spoke. The only sound was the gentle lapping of water against U-28's hull and the distant cry of seagulls. Von Spiegel ordered the hydrophone operator to track the contact. Zimmermann's response came quickly from inside the submarine. The acoustic signature was unlike anything in German naval intelligence files. It wasn't steam turbines, it wasn't diesel engines, it wasn't electric motors. It was a continuous low-frequency hum, unchanging, that didn't vary regardless of the object's speed or maneuvers. The object was moving at approximately 12 knots, faster than U-28's maximum submerged speed of 9 knots. There were no visible propellers, no propulsion wake, no ballast tanks, diving planes, conning tower, periscopes, or any recognizable feature of a submarine. Hartmann would later document in his technical report, confiscated by Marine Corps intelligence and sealed until the year 2044, that the object seemed aware of U-28's presence. It executed a turn that brought it directly beneath the German submarine. The crew on the bridge watched as the luminous shape passed underneath their vessel. The greenish luminescence illuminated U-28's hull from below. Crew members in the control room reported seeing green light filtering through the pressure hull's seams. Then the object accelerated. Hartmann's calculation, based on observed position changes, was chilling. The object covered approximately 800 meters in less than 15 seconds. Speed, nearly 100 knots. To put this in perspective, no submarine in 1917 could achieve even 20 knots submerged. No surface vessel of the era could reach 100 knots. The fastest destroyer in any navy topped out at 35 knots. This object was moving at speeds that wouldn't be matched by submarines until nuclear propulsion in the 1950s. And it was executing these speeds underwater, without propellers, without any visible means of propulsion. But what the object did next would turn hunters into prey and seal the fate of every man aboard U-28.
Von Spiegel didn't hesitate. His survival instinct, honed by 2 years of submarine warfare, screamed a single order: emergency dive. U-28 submerged at 0531 hours, barely 8 minutes after surfacing. Ballast tanks flooded with a roar of water. The submarine tilted downward, descending rapidly as the deck gun crew rushed to close the hatch. 50 meters depth, then 70, then 90 meters, near the submarine's maximum operational limit. Hydrophone tracking continued. Zimmermann reported the object had stopped its acceleration and was now circling U-28's position. Distance, 600 meters. Depth, exactly matching U-28's depth. For 17 minutes, the object maintained this position, circling, watching. Von Spiegel ordered absolute silence throughout the submarine. No unnecessary movements, no talking. Electric motors were shut down completely. U-28 drifted in the current 90 meters beneath the surface, while something circled in the dark water. The men in the control room barely breathed. They could hear the submarine's hull creaking under pressure. They could feel the cold seeping through the steel. But most of all, they could feel the presence of that thing out there, moving around them with deliberate purpose. Then, at 0548 hours, the hydrophone signature changed. The low-frequency hum increased in intensity. Zimmermann reported the object was descending. 100 meters depth, 150 meters, 200 meters, 250 meters, descending to depths that would crush any submarine hull of the era. German U-boats had a maximum operating depth of 50 meters, collapse depth around 75 meters. This object descended beyond 250 meters and the hydrophone lost contact. Not because it had moved out of range, the acoustic signature simply ceased, as if the object had been switched off. U-28 remained submerged for another 4 hours.
Von Spiegel ordered the submarine to surface at 0952 hours. There was no sign of the object, no acoustic contact. The Atlantic was empty and calm. By 1200 hours that day, every man aboard U-28 had been interviewed by von Spiegel and Hartmann. 46 separate testimonies, 46 descriptions of the same impossible object. Von Spiegel began drafting his report to 2nd U-boat Flotilla headquarters in Emden. He completed it on February 22nd, 3 days after the encounter. The report was transmitted by wireless telegraph when U-28 returned to Emden on March 1st. Marine Corps intelligence officers were waiting at the dock. What happened next would initiate a chain of events that would end with every witness's death. Hit subscribe if these submarine encounters are making you question the official history of World War I, because the systematic suppression coming next reveals just how far the German Navy went to erase this evidence.
Within 6 hours of U-28's arrival in Emden, every written record of the February 19th encounter had been confiscated. The war diary pages covering February 18th to 20th were physically removed from the official logbook. Personal letters written by crew members were seized before they could be mailed. Hartmann's detailed technical report was classified as Geheime Kommandosache, top secret command matter. Von Spiegel's report was sent directly to the Admiralstab der Marine in Berlin, the Supreme Naval Command. It never appeared in any subsequent intelligence summary. It was never mentioned in any tactical analysis. It was never shared with other U-boat commanders operating in the same waters. It simply vanished into classified files. The 46 crew members were forced to sign statements acknowledging that disclosure of the incident would constitute treason under wartime regulations. The penalty for treason was death. No appeal, no second chances, just execution. And the process of eliminating the testimonies had begun. Oberleutnant zur See Friedrich Wilhelm Hartmann documented the February 19th encounter in his personal diary. That diary, along with all his personal effects, was seized during interrogation at Emden. Hartmann had written to his fiancée, Margarete Schmidt, on February 25th, describing the encounter in terms a civilian could understand. That letter was intercepted by military censors before leaving the naval base. Margarete never received the letter. She never knew what her fiancé had seen beneath the Atlantic waters. When she was interviewed in 1968 by naval historian Dr. Klaus Weber, she was already an elderly woman of 73. She still kept Friedrich's earlier letters, those the censors had allowed through, but the February 25th letter, the one describing the encounter, had vanished into some military intelligence archive. Hartmann was interrogated for 7 hours by Korvettenkapitän Heinrich Wassner, a Marine Corps intelligence officer specializing in operational security. Other officers aboard U-28 reported that Hartmann became withdrawn after the interrogation. He refused to discuss the encounter even with his closest friends aboard the submarine. When other officers mentioned the incident privately, Hartmann would silence them with a look. The message was clear: silence wasn't optional. In his last letter home, dated August 3, 1917, 5 weeks before U-28 disappeared, Hartmann wrote to his mother words that would haunt his family for generations.
The letter was preserved in family papers and published in Weber's 1972 study titled Unexplained Losses, U-Boats of the Great War. Hartmann wrote, "We saw something beneath the waves that shouldn't exist. They've made clear what silence means. If something happens to me, know that the sea keeps secrets that men are forbidden to speak." The tone was unmistakable. Hartmann knew he was in danger. He knew the enforced silence came with an implied threat, and he knew that speaking meant death. But even more revealing was what he didn't say. He didn't mention the enemy. He didn't talk about British destroyers or depth charges. He talked about secrets men were forbidden to speak.
On September 2, 1917, SMU-28 departed Emden on its 14th war patrol. The submarine was operating in the western approaches to the English Channel, hunting shipping traffic moving between England and France. On September 2nd, U-28 attacked and sank the British steamer SS Olive Branch, 4,000 tons. It was U-28's last confirmed sinking. It was the last time anyone saw the submarine alive. U-28 didn't return to base on its scheduled date of September 20th. No distress signal was received. No wreckage was ever found. No British or French naval force reported attacking a U-boat in U-28's operational area during that period. The Kaiserliche Marine listed U-28 as missing with all crew, 46 men, including Korvettenkapitän von Spiegel and Oberleutnant Hartmann. Official cause, unknown. No formal investigation was conducted despite the unusual circumstances. The operational area was well charted. Weather conditions were recorded as favorable. No minefields existed in the sector where U-28 was operating. Submarines don't simply vanish in calm weather in shallow waters with no evidence of combat or mechanical failure. Yet U-28 did. 6 months after its crew encountered something beneath the Atlantic, 6 months after they were ordered to silence under threat of death. Coincidences. But the elimination pattern was just beginning. What happened to the other witnesses would reveal the true extent of the suppression.
Bootsman Ernst Keller had written a letter to his wife on February 28, 1917. Keller was U-28's senior penny officer, 41 years old, a 23-year veteran of the Kaiserliche Marine. He'd served aboard surface ships before volunteering for submarine service in 1915. He was scheduled to rotate to shore duty in June 1917. 3 months of life remained, if he'd survived U-28's final voyage. His letter described the luminous object as alive, conscious, watching us with an intelligence that felt ancient. These weren't the words of a man prone to fantasy. Keller was a hardened sailor, a professional who'd seen combat at the Battle of Jutland, who'd survived storms that sank larger ships. His wife, Anna Keller, preserved the letter among family papers for decades. In 1989, her granddaughter donated it to the Deutsche U-Boot Museum in Cuxhaven, the German U-Boat Museum, documenting German submarine warfare history. Museum archivists found the letter unusual enough to contact naval historians. Dr. Klaus Weber requested access to Marine Corps records related to U-28's February 1917 patrol. The request was reviewed by the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv in Freiburg, the federal military archive housing historical records of German armed forces. The response, dated November 14, 1989, stated, "Records pertaining to SMU-28 operations from February 1917 are classified. Access denied under Section 5 of the Military Archives Act." Why were 1917 records still classified in 1989? 72 years after the event, 44 years after World War II ended, 71 years after World War I ended. What information could require continued secrecy? Bootsman Keller never returned from U-28's final patrol. His body was never recovered. The letter remained the only surviving testimony of what U-28's crew had witnessed. Until 2003, when British naval researcher James Mitchell discovered something extraordinary in captured German naval archives held at the National Archives in Kew, London. Matrosengefreiter Klaus Zimmermann, the hydrophone operator who first detected the object, kept a separate technical log. Zimmermann was 24 from Hamburg.
He'd trained as an acoustic specialist at Marineschule Mervik before the war. His specialty was identifying Allied vessels by their acoustic signature. He could distinguish a destroyer from a cruiser, a merchant ship from a warship, purely by the sound of their propellers.
His technical log from February 19th contained acoustic analysis that Marine Corps intelligence deemed too sensitive to include in any official report. According to Mitchell's 2005 paper titled Anomalous Acoustic Contacts, U-Boat Reports 1914 to 1918, published in the Journal of Military History, Zimmerman noted, "Contact's acoustic signature matches no known propulsion system. Frequency spectrum suggests electromagnetic generation rather than mechanical. Calculated power output at minimum 50,000 horsepower, equivalent to a battleship's power plant, but producing no cavitation, no vibration harmonics consistent with rotating machinery." Zimmerman documented that the object's acoustic signature remained constant regardless of its speed or maneuvers. A diesel or steam engine increases in pitch and intensity with speed. Electric motors produce different harmonics at different loads. This object maintained the same low-frequency hum, whether stationary or accelerating to impossible speeds. Zimmerman concluded his entry, "Recommend immediate technical investigation. Object represents unknown propulsion technology, far exceeding the capabilities of any known naval power." That recommendation was ignored. His log was confiscated when U-28 returned to Emden. Klaus Zimmermann died with U-28 on September 2, 1917. He was 24 years old. His technical log, captured by British intelligence after Germany's surrender in 1918, was filed under miscellaneous German naval documents and forgotten for 85 years. James Mitchell discovered it while researching U-boat tactics for his doctoral dissertation. He immediately recognized the significance of Zimmermann's acoustic analysis. Mitchell submitted a detailed research proposal to the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv, requesting access to all Marine Corps intelligence files related to acoustic contacts from 1917 to 1918. The request was denied. The official response, dated March 12, 2004, cited ongoing classification review and potential compromise of current naval operations. How could 1917 acoustic data compromise 2004 naval operations? Mitchell appealed the decision. He pointed out that World War I had ended 86 years earlier, that all participants were long dead, that the technology involved was nearly a century old. The appeal was rejected without explanation. Mitchell published his findings anyway in 2005. 6 months after publication, he was involved in a single vehicle accident on the M25 motorway outside London. His car left the road at high speed, struck a bridge abutment, and burst into flames. Mitchell died at the scene. He was 37 years old. The inquest ruled accidental death. Driver fell asleep, no other vehicles involved, no mechanical defects found. His research notes on the U-28 encounter disappeared from his office at King's College London between his death and his family's arrival to collect his belongings. The university reported no record of anyone accessing his office during that period. The notes have never been recovered. But the suppression didn't end with modern researchers. The pattern extended beyond U-28, encompassing multiple submarines and crews throughout the entire war. Smash that subscribe button if these systematic deaths are disturbing you, because the peak intensity hasn't arrived yet. The true magnitude of witness elimination is about to be revealed. The February 19, 1917 encounter wasn't isolated. Between 1914 and 1918, German naval records contain references to at least 14 similar incidents involving U-boats reporting anomalous submerged contacts. 14 encounters with objects that defied all known laws of physics and naval engineering. And every submarine that filed such a report was eventually lost. North Sea, October 1914, U-9, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Otto Weddigen, reported a massive luminous object at 60 meters depth off the Dutch coast. Weddigen was Germany's first U-boat ace, a national hero who'd sunk 3 British cruisers in a single patrol just a month earlier. His report about the luminous object was immediately classified. Weddigen died when U-29 was rammed by HMS Dreadnought in March 1915. The collision occurred in clear weather, calm seas. The official British history calls it a chance encounter. A chance encounter. A British battleship, by coincidence, ramming a German submarine commanded by Germany's highest-profile ace, a submarine whose commander had reported anomalous contacts 6 months earlier. Coincidences? Baltic Sea, July 1915. Submarine support ship SMS Vulcan reported coordinated acoustic contacts, 3 separate objects moving in formation, depth 80 meters. The objects were tracked for 40 minutes, then descended beyond hydrophone range. All records were confiscated by Marine Corps intelligence. Vulcan personnel involved in the tracking were dispersed to different assignments within a week. 6 of those men died in unrelated naval actions over the next 18 months. 6 out of 15, a 40% mortality rate, in a war where the overall German Navy mortality rate was approximately 15%. Statistically improbable. Irish Sea, December 1916, U-55 encountered a cylindrical object, estimated length 150 meters, emitting pulsating light. The object maintained a position 500 meters from U-55 for 32 minutes, then accelerated to speeds calculated at over 90 knots. U-55 returned to base safely, filed its report, continued operations. It was sunk by Q-ship HMS Privet in April 1917. No survivors.
Q-ships were armed merchant vessels disguised as easy targets. When a U-boat surfaced to attack with its deck gun, the Q-ship revealed its hidden weapons and fired at point-blank range. U-55 was sunk by a Q-ship despite its commander, Kapitän-Leutnant Wilhelm Werner, being known for extreme caution. 43 successful patrols. He'd never surfaced near a target without thoroughly verifying it first. Except the day he was sunk. As if his characteristic caution had suddenly been abandoned, as if something had led him to make a mistake no experienced commander would make. The pattern was forming across 3 years, multiple submarines, different commanders. Objects far larger than any submarine, exhibiting impossible speeds, descending to crushing depths, emitting their own light, tracked by hydrophones but showing no conventional propulsion signatures. And every U-boat that filed such a report was eventually lost. The statistical probability of this loss rate, never calculated by any official investigation, suggests something beyond coincidence. U-boats that reported anomalous contacts had a 100% mortality rate. 100%. Of the 14 submarines that filed classified reports about unexplained submerged contacts, 14 were eventually lost, with all crews. Some in confirmed combat, some in questionable circumstances, some simply disappeared without a trace. The average U-boat loss rate during World War I was approximately 30%. High, certainly, given the dangers of submarine warfare, but 30%, not 100%. Submarines that didn't report anomalous encounters had a 70% chance of surviving the war. Submarines that reported such encounters had 0 chance of surviving. 0. This isn't coincidence. This is systematic elimination. But the pattern extends beyond the original crews. It extends across the decades, touching anyone who tries to investigate these incidents. Dr. Klaus Weber, the naval historian who first discovered Bootsman Keller's letter in 1989, continued his research on unexplained U-boat losses for several years. He published his initial study in 1992. He requested access to classified files in 1993. Access denied. In 1995, Weber was preparing a follow-up study that would have documented the pattern of anomalous report classification. He'd identified 3 other incidents besides U-28 where documentary evidence suggested encounters with unexplained submerged objects.
In June 1995, Weber was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. He died in September 1995, 3 months after diagnosis. He was 54 years old, in prior good health, with no significant risk factors for pancreatic cancer. His research files were deposited in the Bundesarchiv according to his will's instructions. When later researchers requested access to those files, they were informed that Weber's material had been misplaced during archive reorganization in 1997. Misplaced. Complete files from a respected historian simply vanished. James Mitchell, the British researcher who discovered Zimmermann's technical log, wasn't the only academic who died after investigating these encounters. In 2008, Professor Annika Lindström from Stockholm University published an analysis of U-boat loss patterns that identified significant statistical anomalies. Submarines operating in certain areas of the North Atlantic during specific periods in 1917 showed loss rates that couldn't be explained by known Allied anti-submarine activity. Lindström requested access to German, British, and American naval archives. Germany denied access, citing ongoing classification. Britain denied access under Section 23 of the Freedom of Information Act would prejudice international relations. The United States denied access, citing national security exemptions. National security exemptions for century-old documents. Lindström continued her research using already publicly available materials. She was preparing a paper arguing that German naval intelligence had systematically concealed U-boat reports to avoid panic among submarine crews. In January 2009, Lindström was found dead in her Stockholm apartment, apparent suicide by prescription drug overdose. Her colleagues expressed shock. Lindström had shown no signs of depression. She'd just received a major grant. She was engaged to be married in June. The investigation concluded suicide. Case closed. Her laptop, containing all her research files, was stolen from her apartment sometime between her death and the discovery of her body. Police never identified the thief. The pattern repeats. Researchers ask too many questions, seek access to classified files, publish preliminary findings. Then they die. Car accidents, sudden illnesses, improbable suicides. There's always an explanation. There's always an official cause that raises no suspicions. But the machinery of suppression established during the war remains operational 110 years later. And the question no one in a position of authority is willing to answer is why.
Because the truth emerging from these patterns is too disturbing for official acknowledgement. During World War I, beneath the Atlantic Ocean, multiple German submarine crews encountered objects that shouldn't exist. Objects that demonstrated technological capabilities decades, perhaps centuries ahead of anything humanity could build. Objects that seemed conscious, that watched, that tracked.
And every attempt to document these encounters, investigate them, or reveal their existence has been systematically suppressed. The original witnesses were silenced under threat of death, then eliminated when their submarines mysteriously disappeared. Modern researchers attempting to document the pattern die in convenient accidents or sudden illnesses. Files remain classified a century after the event. Access requests are denied under national security provisions that make no logical sense for events so ancient. This isn't protecting obsolete military secrets. This is protecting a truth that governments aren't willing to acknowledge. That we're not alone, that we've never been alone, and that the ocean depths harbor intelligences that have been watching us for far longer than we want to admit. SMU-28 disappeared with all hands 6 months after its encounter. The official cause is unknown. No formal investigation was conducted. The case was simply closed. 46 men vanished beneath the Atlantic waves. 46 testimonies were permanently silenced, and the German Navy ensured the records of what those men had witnessed remained sealed for generations. The pattern continues to this day.
Official records remain largely sealed. The original reports filed by U-28's crew are held at the Bundesarchiv Militärarchiv under reference number MR972441 U-28 Feb 1917. Classification Geheim, secret. Sealed until the year 2044. Attempts to obtain release under Freedom of Information laws have been consistently denied. In 2016, British historian Dr. Michael Crawford petitioned for partial declassification. The request was reviewed by Germany's Federal Ministry of Defense. The response, after 14 months, stated, "Release of the requested material would be contrary to the public interest and could compromise national security." No further explanation was provided. The public interest argument wasn't elaborated. How could documents about events over a century old still threaten national security? Files that have been released are heavily redacted. A 2018 release of 2nd U-Boat Flotilla intelligence summaries from the February to March 1917 period included 47 pages. Of these, 32 were so heavily redacted they contained fewer than 10 legible words per page. Sections corresponding to the dates around the U-28 encounter were removed entirely, with the notation exempted under Section 8, National Security. The February 19, 1917 encounter was just one of many. The pattern extended throughout the entire war, touching multiple submarines, multiple crews, multiple theaters of operation. And every instance was suppressed with the same meticulous care. Reports classified, witnesses silenced, evidence destroyed. Decades later, when researchers attempted to reconstruct what had occurred, they encountered the same barriers: sealed archives, denied requests, and convenient deaths. The suppression machinery established in 1917 remains fully functional over a century later. Which brings us to the question no one in authority is willing to answer. What's being protected? What truth about those encounters, about what was lurking beneath the Atlantic in wartime, can't be allowed to enter public consciousness? The answer lies not in official explanations, but in the suppression pattern itself. Truths that require a century of classification, that demand systematic elimination of researchers, that provoke coordinated denials from multiple governments, aren't trivial truths. They're truths that challenge fundamental frameworks of understanding, truths that question basic assumptions about our place in the universe, truths that governments have decided humanity isn't ready to confront. February 19, 2027 marks the 110th anniversary of the U-28 encounter.
On that date, in 1917, 46 men witnessed something that shouldn't exist, something that has since been systematically erased from naval history. There are indications that similar encounters continue to this day. Acoustic anomalies tracked by modern navies, submerged contacts executing maneuvers impossible for any known craft, official reports that vanish into classification. Whether February 19, 2027 will bring revelation, repetition, or simply another anniversary of suppressed truth remains to be seen. But for those who recognize the pattern, for those who understand what was witnessed and concealed, the date carries weight.
Drop a subscribe if this video changed your understanding of what really happened beneath the Atlantic during World War I, because every week I break down the historical secrets that governments work desperately to keep hidden.